It's always a delight to be here with Nigel Clarkson at the Yahoo headquarters in London. How are you today?
Good, thank you. Good to see you again, Anna.
Good to see you too. And obviously Yahoo has got some massive news this week.
Yeah, very exciting week for us. So on Tuesday, we officially PR'd a deal that we've just done. It's a content distribution deal. As we know, the big challenge for publishers nowadays is around, obviously you own your own platform and you own the distribution within that platform. But the challenge is how do you get more people to read your content at a very basic level? So we have signed a deal with The Telegraph, The Guardian, The Independent, Evening Standard and Hearst magazine. So 5 amazing publishers, premium content generators. And our deal is basically to be able to distribute their content across all of the Yahoo platform in multiple countries. So I think where some of the reasons that they're most excited is the footprint of Yahoo. Yahoo still has nearly 1 billion people globally consuming our content. One of those publishers, who will remain nameless, but within a week of that deal going live, one of those publishers was already the 3rd most read publisher within the Yahoo ecosystem in the US. The US got access to 250 million people. And all of that will be monetized by our native platform. So, it's a proper win-win. It's a proper partnership. All of those great publishers means that their access is going to get to loads more people that ordinarily they wouldn't have done. Particularly some of them maybe don't have as big a footprint in the US as they would like. But for us in the UK, it gives us an amazing opportunity to be able to demonstrate the ability to have different publishers on our platform. And I think as a publisher to go and partner with other publishers, it can be seen as quite a brave move. Yeah. For me, I love the whole concept that The Telegraph and The Guardian, 2 of the most diametrically opposed sort of political papers, are both going to be on our platform, and kind of it brings in one of those challenges around the internet with with algorithms dictating what people are actually going to read about, whether if you read the same stuff all the time, you're going to get the same news. So hopefully it's going to give all of our readers much more choice of the kind of articles and content that they read.
And you were mentioning earlier about a conversation you've seen about circulation versus distribution. Yeah. And obviously that ties in a little bit with what you've been discussing. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about this discussion you went to.
I hope I do it justice, because it was a far brighter man than me that told me about it. But we had dinner with a guy called Tom Chatfield, who is an academic. He's a digital psychologist. And he talked about the fact that we're moving from this age of distribution to circulation, and the whole concept of distribution. Classic news brands obviously used to own, their audiences. They would print what they printed. It went out to those audiences. They read it. Now, whether they spoke about the content and they debated the content, it would be in private. And obviously, pre-social media, pre-social listening, we had no means of understanding what conversations were going on. And generally, they're on a sort of person-to-person basis. We're now in this world of circulation where once you've seeded your content out, you kind of, to a certain extent, you're losing control of it, because it then gets circulated by other people. So we become peer-to-peer distributors, almost like mini publishers ourselves. And I think some of the social networks have looked at this, that actually sort of something like 80% of is the classic 80-20 rule, but 80% of content is shared by about 20% of kind of super users. I just think it's a really interesting concept, because it actually brings into play whether we're creating content for the right reasons now. So, if you think there's a lot of clickbait stuff out there. So you won't believe what this football player did next, and what they 3 clicks later they've scored a goal. That's exactly what you would have thought they'd have done. But so there is a challenge around clickbait, and actually our publishers now creating stories that are more likely to be shared rather than creating stories that we feel that our readers and our audiences would really like. And it's I think in a world of some of the challenges we have around fake news and everything else, it's a really interesting concept to think about. So, what I like about this deal that we've done is it means that they are effectively broadening their ability to distribute the content in a responsible fashion, and in a network which is obviously famous and global.
Fabulous. And we were talking a little bit as well about the Snapchat IPO, IPO, that's coming out, and whether or not the valuation is fair. Do we think? I was just thinking about what you were saying about the value of content, and obviously the stuff that people produce on Snapchat is quite mixed. Some of it's obviously, there's some great publishers, and Snap itself produces some interesting content, but then there's a lot of people's faces with deer filters on and things. Who doesn't love the deer filter? Do you think that it's a fair valuation?
But look, first, I'm not an investor. My overview of this is, so I like to be a champion of all things digital. I sit on the main IAB board. it's given a lot of kind of people who want to knock the digital industry another excuse to say, oh, there's a massive bubble. People have been saying there's a bubble for 10 years. Yeah, it's continuing. So if you think ultimately we're in an area where it's all about platforms, and I think the reason that those publishers have come to Yahoo is we're a massive distribution platform. You look at the likes of Uber. They're a platform. They don't own cars, and this is a classic quote. Tom Goodwin came out with a few years ago. Airbnb don't own any hotels, yet they're the biggest hotel business. So if you own the platform, then you own distribution. You own people to people. Then the content kind of comes. So I think on the one hand, Snapchat, a lot of it, the personal content which is shared but it's meant to be fun. It's frivolous, and brands. I think brands are having fun trying to work out how they can get involved on a kind of a whether when they put the tags on the slides that you can apply to your pictures. So I think that's really interesting. I think the really interesting space is the publishing partnerships that they're starting to sign. And the conversation we had quickly before the camera was on, so you could show 10 different views from mobile phones of a touchdown at the Super Bowl. Yeah. Now I don't know how that works with rights, but from a person-to-person view, when you then curate that into here's our Super Bowl story 5 minutes later, and millions of people are accessing it quickly. I know recently I did a talk at my old school. Actually, I went back with Simon Dalgleish, the commercial director at ITV, and Steve Parker. We all went to school together. We did a kind of a media careers day, and I asked them which platforms were they on, and everybody had email, which was good to see, and pretty much everyone used Snapchat. So I think the challenge is it's really, really sticky now in terms of younger generation. They're on it for hours. The challenge is, when those sort of 17, 18, 19-year-olds become 35, 36-year-olds, are they still using it? Or as we were talking about earlier, has something new come up? Have they migrated onto different platforms? So look, I think it's exciting. Claire Velotti, who runs Snapchat in the UK, who I know, I said to her before she joined us, whatever happens, that's going to be a hell of a ride. It's going to be really exciting. Clients want to know about it, because clients and agencies and people like me who are old and think we know about it don't really understand how the youth of today are using it. But I think the valuation will be what it will be, and I think they're going to do an amazing job. The challenge is whether it ever lives up to investors' expectations, and that's a challenge for all of us.
From a very youth-focused modern platform onto the classic TV model. Yeah. So what you were saying earlier is that online brands are actually the biggest advertisers on TV these days. Yeah,
so I saw there was a press release yesterday from Thinkbox, which is the governing trade body on television. Lindsay Clay, who's an excellent supporter of the advertising industry and TV in particular. And I think online brands have become, for the first time ever, the biggest spenders as a category. I think they've just overtaken entertainment or FMCG. And look, it's interesting because there is a real kind of land grab at the moment on across all of the different trade bodies around who's doing the best work. I think online has had so much attention for the last 5 years, online and mobile, particularly around data capabilities and distribution and numbers. And we all throw tetrabytes of data and all of these figures around. And I think the traditional media channels have felt a little bit like Emperor's New Clothes. Something new's come along and that's really shiny and exciting. But actually, I don't think Box and IAB have tried to, although we've had a few minor skirmishes, we have tried to remain supportive of the fact that actually both channels support each other. We are aware that when you are watching things on television, including adverts, that is a real major cause for you to get onto your phone, to get onto your tablet, to book a holiday, to look a car, test drive a car, etc. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. It obviously shows that online brands believe that as a media channel, telly is probably the best way to drive direct traffic because of the way in which we meerkat between screens. When we sit at home now, and that classic image of 4 people on the sofa having to argue over what channel to watch that's not relevant anymore. And
my concentration span now, though, I find the only way I can watch TV is doing it on my phone.
Doing either well,
yeah, right? Exactly.
You're commenting to your mates, you're sharing content, you're commenting on social platforms, and I do it. I love rugby, and when I watch a rugby match, I end up spending half of my time commenting to my mates about what's going on in a rugby match rather than just watching the game.
That's why I find watching actual long form content on my phone works, because then I can't be messaging my friends or something while I'm watching it. I have to actually pay attention, which is that and the cinema. They're the two mediums I actually consume video, really.
And I think, look, there is, I think, and that's you just raised a classic challenge where everyone's battling over who owns, it's mobile's the first screen, telly's my second screen. It's a screen, and there was a really interesting article on LinkedIn that I read yesterday around they called it big video, which seems like we've got big data, so might as well have big video, but the article was from Wired magazine, and it talked about the TV ads not going anywhere, it's going everywhere, and it was around now digital billboards, mobile, tablet, PC, etc. So it's really interesting, really exciting space. But actually the concept of big video I think works better, because TV is still a device. And I know things are made for TV, but that's because that was the only device. Yeah. And actually, I'm as likely to see somebody on the tube in the morning watching a rerun of The Great Bake Off on their...
Also for me.
But gaming is huge, which is very not telly. So it's an interesting space. But I thought that announcement was huge, because you would naturally always think that FMCG and Ents brands would be the big ones. So it's good, and hopefully will be a continuing kind of force that we are working together as media channels to understand how we complement each other better.
And you said FMCG, which leads nicely into the Unilever Kraft Heinz deal that could have been but wasn't. Why do you think it wasn't, and what would a major consolidation like that have meant?
I would insult you with even giving you an answer. I mean, I saw the news. It would have been an absolutely huge takeover. I know there are challenges around what happened with Kraft and Cadbury, and everybody gets very protective about kind of history and what people are going to do to what brands, and it sounds like luckily they've moved away from the deal amicably, and that's good, and that obviously means that I think what was good about it is there wasn't a protracted uncertainty around the deal. There was a bit of excitement briefly. Whatever happened behind the scenes happened. They've made a call, they're out, and then we can all move on. So I think that's probably good for certainly lots of agencies across town would have been nervously looking at the deal, looking forward to a repitch at some point. So I think that's good news for us.
I think it's one to keep watching anyway, see if there's any movement.
No idea.
So I wasn't lucky enough to see this, but my boss was along and saw Jerry Borman from Dentsu Aegis Network having a chat, and he says that there's a pivot away from mass audience to mass customization. Did you see that news?
I read it in your marvellous publication, of course.
Marvellous publication. Do you think it's part of a wider trend?
Yes, I guess. Look, back to the TV thing. I think Thinkbox's figures are showing that TV viewing is remaining relatively consistent. People are still watching for many hours each day, but because the choice, and again, we will come from a background when we would have known 4, 5, 6, 10 channels. Pretty much every household now has access to 60, 70. So, the X Factor audience, for example, which was not that long ago 16 million, now is 7 million. So there has been a harder ability to hit people, but 7 million in people in one go in one ad break is still huge. So I think it's not like we're suddenly working on micro personalization for sure. There is still mass channel. Particularly my background has also involved working with and running outdoor advertising businesses, and ironically they are all about mass. Outdoor advertising is in rude health. Revenues are up still for what is the oldest media channel and should be having the biggest challenges. But ironically, the growth in outdoor is being driven by digital screens and by data in out of home. So so it's a personalised channel which works. It's a mass market channel that works best when it is mass market, but is increasingly being driven into understanding how to better understand targeting. So targeting is not going anywhere. Let's be clear. And Mark Pritchard has recently, his comments, which again were skewed to suit certain purposes. What Mark actually said was, we have found that hyper targeting on Facebook has not always worked as well as just mass marketing on Facebook. They're spending the same amount of money. So it was seen as the death knell of targeting and data in online. That's clearly not the case. They're still going to spend, but they realise that actually maybe online does a really good job of branding as well. I don't understand how seeing an ad in a magazine or driving past a bus stop or seeing an ad in a tube panel for a matter of a second or half a second suddenly is allowed to be a branding thing. And then suddenly if you see a homepage banner or a video ad for 5 or 6 seconds, that's not allowed to be branding. It has to be a cost per completed view or a click. And this obsession with performance metrics is a real challenge for our industry. We know that online and mobile can do branding. The reality is that we haven't probably chosen to buy in that way. We've chosen to hyper target because the data's there. And I think a lot of the challenges to our industry are we do things because you can. Yeah. We don't do them because it's the right thing to do. And what I don't know if the right answer is that other channels are forced to step up to the same level of expectation that brands have about digital, or whether they dumb down the digital hyper targeting a bit, or maybe true kind of win-win, we meet somewhere in the middle. So we'll see.
Well, thanks ever so much for chatting. It's lovely to hear all your opinions on all the stuff that's going on, and have a fabulous weekend.
Thank you for having me.